Imagine spending years building a little piece of peace in your neighborhood, only to have it shattered by someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them. That's exactly what happened to Eric Patterson. He worked hard for a home that symbolized safety, but instead, it became a battleground with a neighbor who believed her power in the HOA gave her the right to trample over him. Literally, Karen wasn't just crossing boundaries, she was driving straight through them. Eric warned her time and time again, but she ignored every word. And when her arrogance collided with his patience, something unforgettable happened. A trap that would teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Eric Patterson lived at the edge of a small suburban neighborhood, a place meant to embody quiet living. He wasn't asking for much, just a stretch of yard where his kids could play safely, and a wooden fence he'd built with his own hands to mark his property line. That fence wasn't just wood and nails. It was a symbol of his effort, his dedication to shaping a home where his family could thrive. But from the start, there was tension with his neighbor, Karen. Where others might have seen a fence as a simple boundary, she treated it as a personal challenge. She dismissed Eric's request to respect his property, brushing him off as if his concerns didn't matter. The HOA only emboldened her. She carried herself like the neighborhood sheriff. But instead of protecting fairness, she enforced her own twisted interpretation of rules. It started with small things, disrespectful comments at HOA meetings, little digs about the way Eric chose to decorate his yard, even spreading whispers that his fence was an eyesore. Most neighbors ignored her antics, but Karen wasn't content with just words. She escalated. Out of nowhere, Karen began cutting corners across his driveway, even driving so close that the fence post rattled under the pressure of her SUV. Eric asked her to stop. He warned her directly, "This has to end." But Karen laughed off his words, claiming she had the right to use the road however she pleased. That false sense of authority wasn't just arrogance, it became an act of bullying. In her mind, she was untouchable. For Eric, the situation tipped from frustrating to unbearable. Something had to change. But what he didn't know then was that the day of Karen's reckoning was closer than even she realized. It didn't take long for things to spiral out of control. Each week brought new incidents. Eric noticed tire marks in his yard, freshly broken slats on his fence, and ruts carved deep into his grass after Karen carelessly drove her SUV across the property line. The nerve of it all was staggering. Not only because she was repeatedly warned, but because she seemed to take pleasure in brushing those warnings aside. When Eric brought the issue before the HOA, he thought someone might finally step in. Yet, instead of support, he was met with silence. Karen had allies on the board, people who either feared crossing her or who simply turned a blind eye. Every report Eric filed, every email, every phone call got him nowhere. If anything, it fueled her smugness. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about respect. Eric began to feel the weight of injustice pressing over him. The kind of injustice many know too well. When rules aren't applied fairly. When one person's privilege shields them from consequences. He knew if roles were reversed, he'd been fined, penalized, maybe even dragged into court. But in this neighborhood, with Karen at the center, the rules bent her way. The last straw came one evening when Eric's kids were playing in the yard. Karen sped through like it was her personal shortcut, dust kicking up and rattling their fence until another post broke loose. His children were shaken, and in that moment, Eric understood. This wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about the safety of his family. He gave Karen one last warning. He stood at the edge of the broken fence and told her plainly, "If you keep this up, you're going to regret it." Karen sneered, rolled down her window, and smirked as if to say, "I can do whatever I want." That night, Eric sat at his kitchen table, exhausted yet focused. If the HOA wouldn't act, if warnings fell on deaf ears, then he would find his own solution. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking for justice. Justice Karen had mocked him for even hoping for. So Eric walked the yard, thinking carefully. He knew exactly where Karen's tire tracks cut across his land. He could predict the precise path she'd try again, and that's where his plan began. The weather had been on his side lately. Heavy rains had left soft soil, and Eric leaned into that advantage. He dug trenches across her shortcut path and filled them with water, turning the ground into a deceptive mud road. He camouflaged it just enough so in daylight, it looked like an ordinary patch of earth. It wasn't until weight pressed down that nature would expose the truth. It was simple, non-violent, but effective. And as Eric looked over his work, he felt a calm certainty. Karen would either learn to respect his property or she'd face the natural consequence of her arrogance. The next morning, Eric woke with unease. Would Karen try again? Would she finally take the hint and stop? The answer arrived sooner than he imagined. Sure enough, her SUV appeared right on schedule, roaring down the street, swerving as she prepared to cut across his yard again. Her confidence was striking, as if she had come to prove once more that no fence or warning could block her entitlement. Her tires hit the path and instantly everything changed. The ground collapsed beneath the weight of her vehicle. Mud splattered high, wheels spun helplessly, and within seconds, the once proud SUV was stuck deep in the muck. The harder she pressed the accelerator, the deeper the tires sank until metal began scraping against earth. From his porch, Eric watched the chaos unfold. It wasn't joy he felt, it was relief. A validation that boundaries mattered, that arrogance had consequences. Karen, red-faced and furious, slammed the door and screamed into the sky. Yet for the first time, there was no HOA shield to protect her. No neighbor was coming to her defense. This was her doing, and everyone in the cul-de-sac knew it. The trap wasn't violence. It wasn't revenge. It was a mirror, reflecting back Karen's actions, and as tow trucks pulled her SUV out of the mud, leaving behind a wrecked undercarriage and a ruined sense of superiority, Karen had to confront the truth she'd ignored all along. Eric had warned her, repeatedly, but she thought herself untouchable. Not this time. In the days that followed, things were quieter on Eric's street. The fence remained standing, his children played without fear, and the once dominant voice of Karen grew noticeably silent. She had been humiliated, yes, but more than that, she had been forced to face the consequences of her repeated disrespect. The HOA couldn't twist this story to protect her. Neighbors saw it with their own eyes. Even her few allies on the board couldn't explain away the undeniable proof that she had crossed the line again and again until her own recklessness delivered the outcome. For Eric, the trap wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching accountability where none existed. He didn't seek her downfall. He only sought justice. Ironically, peace arrived only when Karen finally tasted the very disruption she had caused for so long. But this story, while ending with justice at last, echoes something bigger. It highlights how privilege, when unchecked, creates dangerous imbalances, not just in neighborhoods, but in society as a whole. How many Karens exist in our streets, in our circles, even in our systems? And when they cross the line, how long will we allow them to go unchecked before accountability sets in? Sometimes, justice doesn't roar with anger. It waits patiently, like a fence, until arrogance takes one step too far.